Happy to have you here. Before we start, I want to let you know something that we've got sort of eyes on behind the scenes. We've something essentially happening in our control room right now that we are keeping eyes on that we're going to turn around to you as soon as we get it. At Dover Air Base in Delaware, the dignified transfer is taking place right now for U.S. Army Sergeant Benjamin Pennington. He is the 7th U.S. service member to die in combat in President Trump's ongoing war with Iran. Sergeant Pennington is from Glendale, Kentucky. He was just 26 years old. Sergeant Pennington died yesterday. U.S. Central Command said the death was caused by injuries after an attack on the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia on March 1st. So again, the attack was March 1st. He succumbed to his injuries yesterday. Vice President J.D. Vance has been at Dover Air Base to observe tonight's dignified transfer and to meet with Sergeant Pennington's family. The way this works is that we do not have live images of that event, that solemn event, as it happens. We have a camera there to collect tape of it as it happens. And then that tape has to be fed to us after the ceremony is completed. And so at this point, we are waiting for that tape to be turned around and fed back to us in our control room. And then as soon as we have it, we will turn it around and show it to you. We expect that to happen this hour. How has Iran been able to hit American military targets in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and other places? I mean, some targets for them are obvious places that anybody would be able to pick off a map. Places like air bases or even U.S. embassies or consulates. But for all the damage that has been done to Iran's offensive capabilities in this war thus far, Iran has somehow also been able to hit things like, reportedly, a CIA facility in Riyadh, and a naval command and control facility in Bahrain, and U.S. radar facilities that are not clearly marked on any map and not obvious locations for anybody. How has Iran been able to find targets like that so they could aim their missiles and their drones at American facilities like that with such specificity? Well, the Washington Post and the Associated Press and us here at MS Now have all now reported that Iran has been getting help in targeting American personnel and military facilities. Help from a sophisticated military ally in targeting U.S. personnel and U.S. military capabilities all over the Middle East. The Washington Post's report on this was first, and they explained it bluntly and clearly. Quote, Russia is providing Iran with targeting information to attack American forces in the Middle East. The assistant signals that the rapidly expanding conflict now features one of America's chief nuclear-armed competitors with exquisite intelligence capabilities. Quote, Iran possesses only a handful of military-grade satellites and no satellite constellation of its own, which would make imagery provided by Russia much more of Russia and its much more advanced space capabilities highly valuable to the Iranians. So again, this was first reported by the Washington Post. This reporting then corroborated by the Associated Press and by us here at MS Now. The upshot is that Russia is helping Iran. Russia specifically is giving them targeting information, giving them very specific locations, using their own intelligence capabilities to give the Iranians very specific locations so they know where to attack American troops to try to kill them, and where to attack American facilities in the Middle East. Russia is giving Iran that information. What should the United States do about that? Well, under the leadership of Donald Trump, the United States has decided that under these circumstances, what our response is going to be is that we're going to ease sanctions on Russia. Ease sanctions on Russia. Trump has moved to give Russia relief from sanctions. Trump has moved specifically to let Russia sell more of its oil and gas, get around sanctions, restrictions that might have prevented them from doing that before. I mean, Russia is allies with Iran, right? Russia issued a statement of congratulations when Iran chose Khamenei's son to replace him as the country's supreme leader. Congratulations, Junior. Enjoy your Ayatollahship. He's a close relation, a close connection to the radical and powerful Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. Putin sends his personal congratulations. But Russia, as much as they might not want to see their ally put in difficult straits, Russia financially is actually really enjoying this moment. Because what does Russia have to offer the world? What does Russia have to offer the world economy? I mean, if you don't count vodka and potash, Russia basically has two industries, two things to offer the world: oil and war. And they're using their war-making abilities, their intelligence and satellite capabilities to help Iran kill Americans, to help Iran target and kill Americans in the Middle East. Also on the war-making front, Russia is obviously enjoying seeing the United States burn up lots and lots and lots of missiles and interceptor munitions in the Middle East. So we'll be less happy and less able to provide those same types of weapons to Ukraine to fight against Russia. So on the war-fighting side of things for Russia, this is great for them. This is a win-win. And meanwhile, Russia's other industry, oil and gas, is as happy as it's been in a long time because of the huge spike in oil and gas prices all over the world. As Russia's oil and gas competitors in the Persian Gulf all basically get knocked offline, right? If Russia can just sell their oil and gas, if they can be allowed to get their oil and gas to market, well, Russia's going to be rich again, which they desperately need given how they've spent themselves into oblivion in their endless, pointless Ukraine war. And so we now simultaneously have the U.S. intelligence reports that Russia is helping Iran target American personnel and military facilities to kill Americans in the Middle East, and the news that Trump is cutting sanctions on Russia to ensure they can sell practically all the oil and gas they want and refill their financial coffers as a country. And so, what exactly happened today when Trump reportedly called a CBS News reporter and said, the war is pretty much over? And then Trump called a bizarre and incoherent press conference at one of his golf resorts where he said, no, it's not pretty much over. Where did you hear that? Who told you that? Fake news. In the middle of that swirling dust devil of nonsense and reversal and double reversal and incoherence and non sequitur from the President of the United States, what happened in the middle of all that today? Well, according to the Kremlin, in the middle of all that, President Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin and talked to him for an hour. And we only learned about that phone call because the Kremlin told us about it. The White House didn't announce it. The Kremlin did. Did the White House even know Trump was doing that before the Kremlin told everybody it had happened? Did Trump just call Putin from his flip phone? Was it while he was playing golf? Was it even in the White House calendar that today was the day Trump was supposed to check in with his boss? Gulf War II continues. Gulf War I was because Iraq invaded Kuwait and we wanted to make them uninvade Kuwait. Gulf War II was because the George W. Bush administration wanted somewhere else to invade besides Afghanistan. So they made up a fantasy about Iraq having weapons of mass destruction when they didn't. Gulf 43 is now, and Donald Trump started it. But for Gul 43, there is still no coherent explanation from the President or the White House as to what exactly this is all for. Not even an obviously pretextual, false reason like we had from George W. Bush. The President did unveil a new, purported justification for the war today in his rambling press conference at his Gulf thing. He said, quote, "We're doing this for the other parts of the world. We're doing this for the other parts of the world." It's actually hard to argue with that one. That one might actually be true. The Wall Street Journal is now describing this as the most severe energy crisis since the 1970s. CNBC calls it the biggest oil supply disruption in history. Because there is no way to safely move it to market, Saudi Arabia has now cut its production of oil. Iraq's production of oil is down to less than 1/3 what it was before Trump started this war. In Qatar and Kuwait and Bahrain, major energy companies have declared force majeure, which basically means they're saying, hey, act of God outside our control. We can no longer be held to any contracts we previously signed, as they all radically scale down their oil and gas production. And it's not only fuel, it's also food. Huge amounts of fertilizer pass through the Strait of Hormuz, fertilizer bound for ports all over the world, for crops all over the world, for foodstuffs all over the world. Raw materials related to the petroleum industry also being choked off. Administration wanting to make sure that there was no media coverage, that there were no cameras at events like this, at these solemn events at Dover, even as the family may have been there, even as some public officials may have been there. They did not want the public to see these things. That is a debate that I think was soundly settled in favor of people believing there ought to be public access, such as it is, to these events. But it is limited, as you can tell here from this footage that we have got. This is not live. This happened just moments ago. We don't take this footage live. We only take it on a slight delay. Also, we don't air any audio, from these ceremonies. Very tightly constrained so that we can see it, but are also held a little bit at a remove. Do you think those kinds of restrictions are appropriate, given the sort of purpose of us being able to see this that you were just describing? Well, it's very solemn, and maybe not having audio is a worthwhile thing to do. You mentioned that the war in Iraq, and we were been in the Middle East for a long time fighting. And it's interesting to note that at the beginning of the war, Secretary Rumsfeld argued strenuously that we should not have any press coverage at all of what was happening in the Middle East. And I think it was Tory Clark, his press advisor, his communications advisor, I think that's who it was at the time, who argued that we needed to have that. And the result was that we wound up with press embedded with units. And the argument was it's vitally important that the American public see what is done in their name. To be sure, we need to do whatever we can do in order to protect the United States, our allies, our interests everywhere around the world. But whatever is done to do that, it's important that the American public always be informed of what it takes to get it done, whether or not it's getting done, and when it's over, when it is over, that we've accomplished our objectives or have not accomplished our objectives. So full and complete disclosure is vitally important for the health of the Republic, but also it's important for the kids who are out there fighting. It's important that the public knows who's out there, what they're doing, and the efforts in service and sacrifice that are made on their behalf. Rachel, made very, very real by these images we've just had tonight. Colonel Jack, it is always an honor to have you with us whenever you can have time to be here, especially on a night like this. I appreciate you being here, sir. Thanks for having me on the program. All right, that dignified transfer again for Sergeant Benjamin N. Pennington, 26 years old, of Glendale, Kentucky. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The classified report by the National Intelligence Council, quote, found that even a large-scale assault on Iran launched by the United States would be unlikely to oust the Islamic Republic's entrenched military and clerical establishment. Unlikely to oust the Islamic Republic's regime. A sobering assessment as the Trump administration raises the specter of an extended military campaign. The findings were confirmed to the Washington Post by 3 people familiar with the report's contents. They raised doubts about President Trump's declared plan to, quote, clean out Iran's leadership structure and install a ruler of his choosing. So this is a Trump administration intelligence product. This is an analysis produced for Donald Trump by the National Intelligence Council, which is veteran intelligence analysts who are in charge of crafting intelligence assessments for all 18 of the U.S. government's 18 different intelligence agencies. And the National Intelligence Council has advised the Trump administration, has advised the White House that even a large-scale assault on Iran launched by the United States will not be likely to oust Iran's regime. Why are we doing this? Anyway, joining us now is Congressman Jim Hems, Democrat of Connecticut. He is the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, it's really nice of you to make time to be here this evening. Thank you. Good to be with you, Rachel. So, we've just seen the images from that solemn event at Dover Air Base, that dignified transfer of the remains of the 7th U.S. service member to have been killed in this war. We have just spent the last few days, the weekend, including today, watching the economic shock of this war and its repercussions resonate all around the world in ways very large and very small, in multiple countries all over the world, if not every country in the world. The ramifications of what we're doing are deadly and very, very wildly serious. Do you think you understand why we have done this? Why Trump started this war? Well, we finally got a consistent rationale from the Secretary of State, from Marco Rubio. I first heard it in a Gang of 8 meeting in the Tuesday prior to the attack. We heard it as the attack was underway, and we've heard it a variety of times since. And the problem is, it's a profoundly dissatisfying rationale. So, what did Marco Rubio tell us? He said that we were sure that the Israelis were about to launch an attack. Israelis launched that attack, that the Iranians would retaliate against us, and therefore we had to join the Israelis. And Rachel, it's on the face of it. So it's as though we're Liechtenstein, as though we have no leverage over the players in the region. And of course, we do have rather substantial leverage, or at least partnership with Israel. And there were all sorts of options, but that was the rationale. And then, of course, we got the president freelancing his own rationale, which it was about the attempts to kill him, or the nuclear facilities, which we were told were obliterated. But nonetheless, if you go with the Secretary of State's explanation, which he's repeated multiple times, we were passive and reactive bystanders in the single most serious thing that we can do, i.e., get involved in war, and a war in the Middle East. And I don't need to punctuate that point because we all just watched the dignified transfer of the remains of a young soldier, Sergeant Pennington, who was with us a week ago and who is no longer with us. And that just punctuates why this is probably the most serious decision a president can make, taken completely unseriously. Do you believe Marco Rubio when he gave you that explanation? I mean, I hear you that it's at least somewhat consistent in that at least he might be the one person in the administration who said the same thing twice, rather than iterating some new version of an explanation every single time they're asked for an answer about it. But does it strike you as plausible that that is the reason that we did it? As bad a reason as that is, do you think it's true? First of all, I don't spend a lot of time with Donald Trump, but I can only imagine what it's like to be in his war council, right? Because my suspicion is that, every hour or so, the rationale and the emotional temperature and the objectives change. You just need to watch Donald Trump in a news conference to know that that is most likely true. So my best guess is that the president realized that Iran was imminent danger notwithstanding, because that explanation, of course, is both wrong, a lie, and insane, considering that Iran, as vicious and as dangerous as they are weaker today, relatively speaking, than they have been for a very long time. Because of the 12-day War of June, and because of the bombing of their nuclear infrastructure. My guess is that Donald Trump, probably, listening to Prime Minister Netanyahu, who for 40 years this has been his primary objective, decided that he could secure a role in history. And my guess is that the Secretary of State, and I do emphasize that these are my guesses because I wasn't in the room. My guess is that the Secretary of State was doing a lot of backfilling and not particularly well. Again, his explanation makes it sound as though we are reactive and passive bystanders, rather than, a superpower. What do you make of the reports that Russia has been providing targeting information to Iran to help them in killing American service members and targeting American military and other infrastructure in the Middle East? Yeah, I obviously gotta be a little careful about talking about said reports if they exist, given my role on the Intelligence Committee. But one way to think about this is, the United States has been making no secret of its effort, halting though it may be, to help the Ukrainians. And you can imagine what Vladimir Putin thinks now that we have a substantial portion of our military capability exposed in the region. So I mean, I'll leave it at that. Democratic Congressman Jim Hems, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Sir, thank you for your time this evening. It's really good to have you here. Thank you, Rachel. All right, we got much more news ahead here tonight. Stay with us.